familiar with, yeah, where were you when that happened? Yeah,
I
I
put the
remember.
thumbnail down. It says September 11th, 2024, with people who think it more important than most. And that would be us because, the whole theology of the last 45 years in Daniel, that's a pretty big deal.
Well, when you're having the veil tugged, yeah, it may, yeah, get your attention. Hard to say.
Here we go. Welcome, everybody, to Mud Flood Was Armageddon. That's right. The Mud Flood was the biblical Armageddon. Don't let anyone tell you anything else unless they are willing to debate you in a fair and honest way. I'm joined when the Lord is blessing me with RJ, the famous Randy from Wisconsin, the original 9/11 conspiracy theorist. How are you doing, conspiracy theorist?
Good morning. Yeah, what do I have to complain about? Yeah,
What do I have to complain about? You know what? I have to share with you. You know what I'm going through right now? Yesterday I went to, it's only been 3 weeks since I found out they hadn't been taking the money for my scholarship and paying the rent, and I supposedly owed them some money, so I paid them half. And wasn't going to wait, and I was going to go pay, so practically all of it yesterday, and they go like, well, PayPal sent the money, but we don't know we don't know if it went to a sport camp or what, so we can't apply it to your house. And I said, oh, well, I think you can, and you're going to have to
wrong
find it.
again. Yeah.
Yeah, you're going to have to find a way. And they were actually trying to put it on me, man. And so I'm back to being mad at Adam State. And so
Again.
I took a lot of that money, RJ, and spent it on Amazon to get a lapidary machine because it's been 5.5 years, I think. Isn't that when I left Marcus? And I was going to go, Tommy
No,
was
it
going to get
isn't.
the machine, and we were going to do the Stones. The Stones have been on
It's been a
hold for
while. I don't know
five
what's
and a half years, and those
Yeah.
days are over. I bought a new machine today. I'm going to set it up and run it. They had the machine at the school, and he's busy. This has got to get done, and I'm going to do it. And I don't care if they end up saying, I'll have the rent money, but I don't need the mini bike. I don't need anything. I'm going to get these rocks polished and show that they are body parts once and for all. I got the trilobite. I'm going to nephorensic it. My problem, I believe, I was waiting on help. And, with the theology and everything in flux right now, I've never been more motivated than right now. And having this guy, because he sent me back to well, go call PayPal and ask them, did they really send it and get a transaction number? Well, they did. You did it. You did it. He's the one that pulled it up and said, push this button, and I did it. And so I went back, called him, brought him the transaction number. He goes, oh, it has your address on this. Maybe they sent you a check. Go see if they sent you a check. And I said, you want me to go see if PayPal sent me a check? Have you ever heard of them sending a check? He goes, no, but they got your address there, so they might have. So they're okay. All right, I'll go
He's
call
being
him.
very creative, pulling
I'll go
stuff
call
out
him.
of somewhere.
PayPal goes, you know what? We've had problems with Adams before, was what's been implied. They've got a PayPal account. PayPal doesn't want to hear about it. They got the money in the discussion. So I went to the vice president, and told him, I said, guess what I'm going through right now? And
it's like you say, it may create another level of enthusiasm for something.
Well, who knows what. So anyway, we're going to be looking at some videos about 9/11, what I got pulled up, see if any rocks come up, because it's 9/11, and RJ, we do 7 to 10 shows a week, along with being a full-time student and a full-time housekeeper. I don't got nobody to, do my cooking.
Busy times, yeah.
You got these, so here's the, here's the proof that I sent them the money on August 19th, and they sent me this, they forwarded me this on yesterday, and or 2 days, the 9th now, Monday, that's right, when it went down. So yeah, they got a problem, and they're going to
So
have
then, so you do a transaction like you just shown there. Where does PayPal get their cut, from Adams or from you? Or some of each? How's it?
I don't know, and I don't care right now. They get a cut. Just
Yeah,
like
I'm
Google
aware
gets
of
a
that.
cut, Facebook gets ad revenues.
Yeah,
We're all paying the man, and we don't like it. I don't know how PayPal does it.
but we're
I'm not
used
a
to it.
fan of
Yeah,
Peter Thiel.
you don't have
Everybody's
to
got to
like
use
it.
something. So where's that one guy? This guy.
That dude.
Every crisis that America is facing now, crisis is the wrong word for it. The right word for it is consequence. And they weakened
Yeah.
state authority all across so-called Latin America, so that no legitimate power could ever stand up to the violence and corruption that they had sown, that America had sown. But it didn't stop there. No, they went further. During the so-called war on drugs, the US government, through its CIA, got into bed with the very drug lords and cartels that they claimed to be fighting. They did more than just turn a blind eye to the drug trade. They allowed it to grow. They helped it.
Hey, what do you think about that, RJ? He's accusing them of going back how far, how long?
Well, yeah, it's not new news to many of us here, but yeah.
But it's very good. It's kind of cool.
Well, yeah,
I would like to.
That doesn't mean it's not refreshing.
It's the truth. What this guy gets into it, and but first I want to mention our drug connections and for the United States goes back to the famous Flying Tigers, that painted their planes, and everybody goes like, "Ooh, the Flying Tigers." That was the Bermuda Triangle they were protecting. That was the connection to the opium trade. And it's never been anything but an opium war with China and that area for the mob to, so it is all a cartel, but I just don't think people are ready to take it far enough. The old world is currently ass backwards. Brevity is the soul of wit. Thank you for that, soul of wit.
Grow as long as it served their political purposes. In fact, they engineered the flow of drugs into American streets. They were more concerned about controlling so-called Latin America than saving lives, than saving even the lives of their own people. But why is that?
I wonder if this is the one I kind of think is kind of wanted to show.
Obviously, all of that is exaggerated. But could anyone blame the people in those apartment buildings if they fled from those apartment buildings? If they ran away to some other neighborhood? When it happens to you, you understand it perfectly well. When it happens to you, it's a rational thing to do, to run away and to try to find safe haven somewhere else. But when these people, the people in so-called Latin America, run away from the violence and the chaos and the anarchy and the brutality that you created, that you brought into their neighborhoods, while you're nothing but a gang that invaded their apartment complex, you're the same. And when they flee, you blame them. They're fleeing from the poverty that U.S. corporations help.
Wow. Man, this guy, right? I think I subscribe to him, RJ.
Fleeing from the
I believe, he has some sort of knack of spilling the beans all over.
That they had sown, that America had sown. But it didn't stop there. No, they went further.
That's not, let's see. History is a ledger. Did you send me this one too?
Yeah.
This is the one where he talks about repentance.
Yeah, this is only like a day or two old now. That was quite current.
Half a day old. Check it out.
Whatever, yeah.
Home countries. And then when those people come to your country, you have the gall to say that they're leeching off the welfare system and stealing your jobs. Meanwhile, all they're actually doing is expecting you to stick to the so-called values that you espouse, about citizenship and equality and so forth. And there's nothing that you hate more than that, being expected to actually act in accordance with what you say, because you never believed it. You just wanted to be believed while actually never.
Wow, he just dropped
Yeah,
so
well, the
good.
ledger is a debt.
Yeah,
That's
let's
what
hear how he gets into it. Okay.
how he explained the whole, you can only run up so much debt without having to pay the piper. You can kick the can for a while, which we have done, but yeah,
Pretty hard to argue with you.
later, not sooner, but yeah, later, it's going to happen, and that later's coming up on us quite quickly here.
Yeah. Anybody want to argue with RJ that we haven't kicked the can down the road? He's right here waiting for that argument.
Any given moment in the present, you're both settling some accounts and anticipating outstanding payments that will be coming due. The further you move away in time from a past action, the closer you're coming to the consequences of that action. But people, especially on a collective level, on the level of nations, they imagine that the more time goes by, it means that they may never have to pay, as if that transaction just got lost and forgotten somehow. But no, the longer you go without a reckoning, the closer you're getting to the reckoning. All of that to say, America and the collective West have been buying their actions on credit for a very long time, and alarmingly expensive actions that have a monstrous cost, and they've been doing nothing but compound their moral debt all this time.
Huh. He's trying to tie in the fact that it costs so much money to take those astronauts to the moon. Ha ha ha.
Well, yeah, there's some logistics.
And then it comes out like, if you're lying about that, and we've ended up with a moral debt.
Did I tell you the truth?
Are we going to be judged for that? Does God still judge?
Years.
As if the books will never be balanced. But that's not how history works. History is the continuous balancing of the books over and over again. And in fact, we're witnessing this happening right now in the West, to the West. The scales are rebalancing. And I don't think there's anything anyone can do about it except to ride it out. You set this in motion yourselves by your actions, and not just by the actions themselves, but the way you did what you did, and the whole mentality behind that, the whole mentality that drove that, because the mentality is still there. And this is fundamentally the issue. And I believe that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will teach humanity what your mentality leads to. And what it's
and I know I agree with most people. The last thing we need is a Muslim preaching to us, but compared to what they say and the way we've treated people, he has a point, and he does talk it, and this is in no way to diminish the one true religion, Jesus Christ, risen from the dead, God of the universe. But he needs our truth, and we need to agree where he's right, that banning slavery, like what Great Britain claimed to do in United States, is not repenting for slavery, is not repenting for the fact that when they founded the Plymouth and the Plymouth Rock and all of the Pilgrims, within a few years, they had that East English Tea Company and then the West English Tea Company, and they needed slaves for plantations. So they took the people that were, hey, we were friends with you, but now you're working for us. Christopher Columbus, that's our history. And that is something that you can't just go like, well, we've traded that slavery for sharecropping or for debt slave or for this credit economy where I don't know what they say, 4 out of 5 people worry about their credit card payments. That's understandable, I guess.
Yeah, the preamble is an interesting read,
How
for
so?
what it states. you know, in the
No, I don't know. Enlighten me. What do you mean? The preamble of the we the people of the United
Constitution.
States of the
Yeah, where all men are created equal, and that it wasn't applied, but it's a nice
right. And
concept.
we all know we live in a world of 9/11 where all of the governments in the world had to be complicit to say, look, we're going to claim this. We're going to confiscate anything that proves otherwise, and starting with the gas station across the street from the Pentagon that would have had to seen whatever hit the Pentagon. I believe it was a missile, a cruise missile
Yeah,
or something, because
yeah.
this
As
was
far
a
as
self-inflicted gunshot wound.
created equal, yes, we're all fallen, but as far as the opportunities each individual has and the circumstance, yeah, as far as an equality there, unlikely, but we're all equally fallen in need of a savior. So we all share that equally,
Amen.
we're,
Yeah,
but yeah,
there's going to be
the
two
other
kinds of people. Kind of keeping
physics.
with the basic format, even though this is the September 11th, and September 11th is not over. We don't know what's going to happen today. I'll see what I saved on some screenshots. Mysterious DARPA drone spotted off of Waikiki. Did you hear about that one, RJ?
Well, like I explained with my ad blocker, unless it's
Oh
up
yeah,
on
yeah.
my
Oh, okay.
algorithm, it's difficult. Well, there might be a way that I can, cheat the system somehow, but that's the only way I can do it now is
Well,
when it
you
comes
might
up
want
on
to
my.
just think about that $8 a month to YouTube, and just you won't get any
Yeah,
ads and stuff,
so
or
pay the
any
man. Yeah,
pay the
not
man.
well.
You pay the man every day. You know,
Yeah,
Pacmar Technologies was the owner of a drone. It goes in the water. They found out it looks like a plane, but it actually flies in the water. If anybody reminds me, I'll look it up and show my. I think maybe I didn't get a picture. So I have a thing about Gerhard Mercator's sacred geographies during the Reformation. Now it would appear that the wheat and the tares were getting involved where in this Gerhard Mercator, and that after the Council of Trent set the context, he stopped making maps like this that showed, Jerusalem in the center of Africa, geocentric, flat Earth, and he went to, oh, let's just go with the globe thing. Maybe we'll pull that up and look at some of it. I love these "What's Wrong with Classical Mechanics" videos, and because these guys here are young, and they've been told by people like this all their life, you guys are the smartest people in the whole world. And then this guy's going like, okay, then how come I can't figure out gravity? You know what I mean? And so they got
because
the
it's buoyancy and density.
right,
Yeah,
right. The only thing that people, and I watched this thing and I was going like, I was lost after 35 seconds. But the only thing I realized is that they got E equals MC not squared question mark. That's the only thing they know is like, yeah,
yeah.
you gotta
Some
we
things
gotta
are a mystery, or
back
it
to
doesn't
the
exist.
back to the drawing board. I must have
That's why
clicked.
it's a theory.
Yeah, I saved that
You
twice. I
can't
must
prove it,
have.
but
So this is another. I just thought this was kind of a weird Mercator
yeah,
map.
Robot Polisher had a thing about that recently a day ago.
So there's the Judah. He's got the tribe of Dan over here, and this is the Sahara, but it wasn't the Sahara then. I think this is the Midaka Sudan. Is this another picture of the same thing? Anyway, this Hans Holben. Yeah, he's the guy that he did those same things. He was very famous. and this is his thing of the tribes, and stuff like that. And they're showing it not where Israel is today, that's for sure. Of course, everybody I think knows that. I looked at, some more weirdness in Chicago came up. Chicago fire. I used that as a thumbnail, probably scared away about a dozen of my potential 3 dozen viewers. Look at that. I used to go there all the time because I lived pretty close to it. But anyway, it's the Chicago Map Society. Only 440 subscribers, but I looked at them and all their videos are full of these old, super kind of cool, rare maps. I thought maybe, that's like, so here's like what it looked like. Oh, could have been showing you these years, but this is before the Great Fire. Hey, I decided I'm going to do my next college paper that's in this history and culture class about the history of eunuchs and try to tie it into the Book of Enoch, RJ. What do you think of that one? Should be the definitive paper, I think. So here's
patiently waiting for it. Yeah.
So which one of these isn't considered a punishment today?
Probably the tattoo.
Probably the tattoo. Yeah, that's was the 5 ancient punishments.
Right at the top. Yeah, the other ones would be way more severe.
I'm gonna get it. I bought a machine today. I bought a machine to change rocks, man. I am going to. It is time for to take the matters into my own hands. I'm going to show that these are body parts, where they came from, do the best I can, and all of that. Hey, I looked up deicide. I wanted to see if it was a word. It is. But let's look at Amazon. I'm going to show you what I got.
Is that to make a choice, deicide, to decide? Yeah,
killing, God killing of a god.
Okay.
Let's see. Where is that machine I just bought? Give me 1 second. Don't run away. Flat lap.
So you ordered this?
Yep.
So it's currently not in your possession.
Nope, it will be in my possession between the 16th and the 19th. Look at it's the same thing. I saved $100.
Okay.
So I bought one of these. And it's got the drip thing. So I can do it inside. I can just do it dust free, and I just plan on getting the hours and getting it done.
And using it, yeah.
Yeah. But the let's see. If I can just get the title of it. Well, anyway, let's keep rolling here.
Well, it is made locally somewhere.
I guess. Yeah, it might be made somewhere in Illinois, from if I would understand. Okay, so that's old news. That was Tracy Inman is Tracy Evans, and so that's an old plot. Creation of man. I did kind of want to go over this. Maybe we'll save that one. No, we were looking at the picture, so we hadn't finished those. Am I sharing the screen there, RJ?
It appears, yep.
Notice anything different in this one?
Sacred Nashville?
or just well, any of them, yeah. But it is Sacred
Uh,
Nashville. I have never seen. They always only show the time, but William Henry, it says William H, and that he has a 1 hour and 15-minute video. So I just thought I'd save that, and I clicked it, and guess what he's into?
mm,
Nashville and the resurrection, and he truly believes in that theory about Mary Magdalene was married to Jesus and they had babies, but that was why the Roman Catholics killed all the Cathars. It was like kind of a weird video, man. It was kind of like weird, like I've never seen that before, and it made me click on it.
so
And that
how current is it?
3 weeks.
Okay.
Oh, so that must have been the last one I picked. Okay, so they're all I think all the pictures are covered. What else we got here? That's from yesterday, the Women's
Black and
March.
white.
Yeah, this is how women start the riots. They go on strike and go, "We're striking because you men are too afraid." And they go like, "Oh yeah, we'll show you how to strike." It happened then, went over that.
So strike back. Huh?
Women of 1917. I looked up Isaiah 28. The council, it comes from the Lord of hosts. And since I only have, this will be less,
Or the
about
Lord of Armies, yes, yes.
an hour here. With this verse, the Lord of hosts, the Lord of armies, excellent in wisdom, 28:9. Okay, who gets the credit in the book of Enoch? Oh, the gods taught them how to do it. Well, here's we'll just you feel like reading, RJ? I want to,
I probably
because
can.
yeah, because your
What?
righteousness should be straight like a plumb line, and where he's going to end up taking you is not to, like in the book of Enoch, where some other god is teaching these people about the arts and they're teaching these people magic spells. God taught these people that dill is not to be threshed with a threshing sledge. You use a rod for dill. You use a stick. No, you use a stick for dill. You use a rod for cumin. And all of this wonderful counsel comes from the God of hosts that you should fear. Probably pick it up in verse 14 is probably pretty good.
Therefore, hear the word of the Lord, you scoffers who rule this people in Jerusalem, because you have said, we have made a covenant with death, and with Sheol we'll have an agreement. When the overwhelming whip passes through it, will not come to us. For we have made lies our refuge, and in falsehood we have taken shelter. Therefore, thus says the Lord God: Behold, I am the one who has laid as a foundation in Zion a stone, a tested stone, a precious cornerstone of a sure foundation. Whoever believes will not be in haste. And I will make justice the line, and righteousness the plumb line. And hail will sweep away the refuge of lies, and waters will overwhelm the shelter. Then your covenant with death will be annulled, and your agreement with Sheol will not stand. When the overwhelming scourge passes through, you will be beaten down by it. As often as it passes through, it will take you. For morning by morning it will pass through, by day and by night. And it will be sheer terror to understand the message. For the bed is too short to stretch oneself on, and the covering too narrow to wrap oneself in. For the Lord will rise up as on Mount Perazim, as in the valley of Gibeon. He will be roused to do his deed. strange is his deed, and to work his work, alien is his work. Now, therefore, do not scoff, lest your bonds be made strong. For I have heard a decree of destruction from the Lord God of hosts against the whole land. Give ear and hear my voice, and hear my voice. Give attention and hear my speech. Does he who plows for sowing plow continually? Does he continually open and harrow his ground? When he has leveled its surface, does he not scatter dill, so come and put in wheat and rows and barley in its proper place, and emmer as the border? For he is rightly instructed, his God teaches him. Dill is not thrashed with a threshing sledge, nor is a cart wheel roll overcoming. But dill is beaten out with a stick and coming with a rod. Does one crush grain for bread? No, he does not thresh it forever. When he drives his cart wheels over it with his horses, he does not crush it. This also comes from the Lord of hosts. He is wonderful in counsel and excellent in wisdom.
So, God is the one that gives all this knowledge, because I myself can't see myself going, you know what? Let's take this seed and beat it with a stick. And somebody else go, why not a rod? Maybe a rod. How would I know? But they do. We see the pictures of them throwing the wheat up in the air and the chaff throwing away, and the round wooden tools, and we think, easy as pie. I would have thought of that. Maybe you would. Maybe you wouldn't. Maybe you beat it with the wrong stick. Maybe you
Well,
didn't
and that's
know.
just it. Someone that has a new or, where does that idea come from? If it's a good idea, yeah,
Yeah,
it might be the Lord. Go
right.
figure.
So this this
You
picture
know,
kind of
and
looks
it's
like a
process of elimination. Something may work, but if something works more gooder, yeah,
you usually want to
try
go with the
that.
more efficient,
Yeah.
y- you know. It- I stopped it here, but let's go back here. The first, what in the world, but it's everywhere. In my culture class, it's right in their laws, and then we know in the Bible, they all had eunuchs and stuff. And that just seems like another connection for, the ancient world being interconnected, but wacky.
The
Yeah, it wasn't just for the chorus either.
Along the
Yeah.
years, during which the Han dynasty was slowly crumbling, these eunuchs successfully ousted rival officials, including important generals and ministers, acquiring more and more power. They used their authority and influence to embezzle much wealth and strengthen their despotic position. The 10 attendants' actions inevitably further destabilized state affairs and contributed.
So the 10 attendants were eunuchs that this didn't last long.
Yeah, embezzlement is an interesting motive. Yeah.
They may not be, they may have had their privacy dealt with, but they still want money. I mean, I think,
Yeah, at that point, what else is there? Yeah.
it's in us. It's in us, man. And even when we're saved, we have to crucify ourselves daily.
Turban Rebellion.
Wow, a turban rebellion.
In 189, Emperor Ling fell ill and died prematurely at 33 years old.
Wow.
He was succeeded by his 13-year-old son, Liu Bian,
33.
enthroned as Emperor Shao under the regency of
Yeah,
General
we just wanted some
He Jin and
info
Empress
on
Dowager He.
what?
Successfully ousted rival officials, including important generals and ministers, acquiring more and more power. They used their authority and influence to embezzle much wealth and strengthen their despotic position.
Were they
The
using the 13th
actions
month
inevitably
calendar back
further
then?
destabilized
What's that?
Were they using that 13-month calendar back then? When I don't know.
I think so. I thought I had jumped ahead to a spot. who knows? Do you think we should go back to the 13-month calendar? We're not going to. I mean, what's it
Well,
going to be like when the power goes off? You know, this whole 9/11 stuff is actually showing it's going to it's going to have ramifications. The I only watched 5 minutes of the debate last night, and it showed, it proves, I think, that Trump is throwing the election. Nobody wants to be elected. Yikes. Nobody wants to be elected with everybody can see there's no fixing this economy. If there's still people out there that's like, well, if I do my silver stacking right, this and that, tweak my Bitcoin, it's going to be okay. I doubt it. Not in the cities. I think it's why, who doesn't get judged when you look dispassionately without the blinders on of my country, right or wrong? Who's going to look at the United States history and go, the ends justified the means because my grandpa was happy, my dad was happy, and I want to be happy too.
what was the number of treaties? Did you say that they broke
510 is the amount they admit to.
with the native?
Yes, different
Popular.
tribes that were going to be
yeah.
broken every single time. We kept not one treaty. We went into Latin America in the 1900s and 1920s with United Fruit, which ended up being run by the people who run the CIA, the Dulles brothers, Eisenhower on the board, to make Chiquita bananas, the same people that did it with rubber. And their motivation was, you'll meet your quota or we'll cut your hand off. And there's plenty of photos on, and people still,
It's quite the negotiating. Yeah. Okay.
right. And you know what? When they couldn't do it, to make them work harder, they said, okay, you'll meet your quota or we'll cut your children's hands off. There was nothing ever sweet or kind about us taking over. And, we said we freed the slaves. And we make a big moral show of it. It all comes down to, people, you need to understand what we have been teaching for darn near 10 years is that the mud flood was Armageddon. Daniel gives a time of 1,290. Blessed are those who make the 1335. That's another 45 years. And it's from the time of the abomination of desolation when the sacrifice is taken away. That happened when 70 AD, the building was destroyed. Everything was destroyed. Let his blood be upon this generation. Let it be upon us and our children. Well, Jesus and everybody else in the Bible reads it that he was coming back in that generation. We've been teaching that. The Lord gave it to the ministry of Flat Earth Nation Golden Age Past, as we used to call this, as Doug and I came up with that name. But it's been a while, and it's been real. It's around the world, and it's a judgment. The dates go like this. You take the 1,000 years they added, you cancel it with the 1,000-year reign of Satan. You're left with that 290 years. You go back 290 years from September 11th, 2001. You end up on the Gregorian calendar of 1711. Some suspicion about the Julian calendar could be anywhere from 1666 to 1711. Russia used the Julian calendar until 1915 or something right in that era. The calendars are messed up. That is the start where the United States and everything was going. The Pilgrims Satan's loose. They started developing nations in 2001, where it says there'll be 1,290. Blessed are those who make the last 45. That's because all the governments, nations that have been deceived, had to be in on the obviousness of the inside job of 9/11. There's no talk of Building 7. I only watched a half hour of what Redacted put on about 9/11. And when shows that big are giving the same evidence that we've known for all this time, then it's being exposed to where the Trumpsters and everyone else are going to realize, oh my goodness, we've never been great. How much time and effort have I wasted? Go, brother.
Yes, when it comes to collaboration, yeah, the only other topic or would be space exploration is what they share. That sort of nonsense equally. I mean, NASA, yeah, is the big one, but as far as the inside job of what 9/11 accomplished, the whole inside trading and what they were, market manipulating, and then kicking the can down the road and going in and doing what they've been famous at, as far as weapons of mass destruction that non-existent, but
but I voted for Bush twice.
To go in and take, and that's what they're trying to do with Ukraine, the trillions of dollars of resources just waiting there to be scavenged and pillaged. That's why you can hemorrhage so much defense budget, for the corporate, pillaging of what they do. And it's nothing new. It's the same game, just played. That's the current address is Ukraine.
Yeah, and it sounds like
you're not
play a little bit of that.
Sounds like redacted. It sounds like redacted in the background.
Yep. So I just wanted to get it set up.
Ted Walter. He's the executive director of International Center for 9/11 Justice, and he just led a big symposium over the weekend with his presentation called The 9/11 Hijacking Myth Exposed. And Ted joins me now. Ted, great to have you here.
Great to be here, Clayton. Always good to see you.
And great to see you, and great for all of the work that you've been able to do.
If you ever want to have a debate,
symposium with all of these different speakers to shed the truth,
you wouldn't even be talking about.
So we're starting with the hijacking.
Your ideas of it add 1,000 years for Christianity, unless we put together what Fermico was talking about and
right. So and then all of the other
and made it into a Christian movement. So whatever you got, you're late to the party, dude. Don't even try to come off like that here.
Who's never been exposed to all of the pieces of truth that you've exposed over the years. Can you sort of just give us an umbrella understanding of what are some of the main big lies told on that day?
Absolutely. So I like to boil down the events of the day of 9/11 to basically 4 key events or 4 claims that are in the official story. The first is that these 4 planes were hijacked by 19 young Muslims. The second is that those hijackers somehow managed to fly the planes, navigate them, and fly them all the way to their targets, or at least in 3 out of the 4 cases. So you have the flying of the planes. The third is that the U.S. air defense system completely failed to stop these planes from reaching their targets, failed to intercept the planes after they were hijacked. And the fourth claim is then that 3 skyscrapers in Manhattan collapsed because 2 planes hit.
Everybody listening, I want you to know I wholeheartedly agree with everything he said. Nothing about that day makes sense, and I think our United States government is lying.
2 of those skyscrapers. So those are like the 4 main events that we're talking about. And I would say over the last 20 years, a lot of focus has been put on why did the air defenses fail? What was going on with FAA and what was going on with NORAD. And certainly a lot of focus has been put on the question of why do these buildings collapse? And both in the mainstream and in the sort of the alternative community of people questioning this story, particularly the collapse of the buildings. And in my view,
there's so much, RJ. He'll get back to him, but I mean, if
Controlled demolition is that what he really means to say?
They're going to say that, termite in the ashes and stuff. But
that's what
nothing about that day makes any sense to the fact that
demolition.
Cell phones worked calling airplanes for the first time ever, and the only time ever in history at that, for that cell phone technology was that, miraculously the cell phones worked that day, and you
kind of like a phone conversation to the moon, huh?
Kind of like, that those two are birds of a feather.
Beyond any doubt established that the Twin Towers in Building 7, the third building that came down on 9/11, were brought down by controlled demolition. Most likely explosives or thermite-based, nanothermite-based explosives that tore the structure apart and totally pulverized all the concrete. And there's just no way that the top of each building could crush the 90 stories of structure below it, even if it started to fall just a little bit. And certainly the heat from the fires was not enough to weaken the steel. And the Building 7 just dropped straight into its footprint. So that's really well established. And even people that are not involved in questioning these issues have probably heard that idea floating around. The two events that I described first, the hijacking of the planes and the flying of the planes, and our argument, which is that there's no way that the alleged hijackers could have actually successfully hijacked the planes and then flown them to their targets. It's less talked about. It's just kind of assumed that just happened, right? So as an organization,
I missed that. I know that one guy. That's Mohammed Atta. He's the only one I know. You know any?
I don't recognize, faces don't mean much to me.
It's less talked about. It's just kind of assumed that just happened, right? So as an organization, the International Center for 9/11 Justice has decided to put a lot of focus on those first three steps of the story, because we feel like the demolition of the buildings is already really well established. And so for this symposium, we were basically presenting research that we've done over the past year. And my focus was on how plausible is the story of these hijackings, and do we have any real evidence supporting them? Because when you start to dig into it, all the evidence for the hijacking story entirely come from the phone calls that were made, or that were purportedly made from the four aircraft by several of the passengers and flight attendants. And so I can dive into that.
Yeah, let's get to the phone calls in a second. You say that everything starts with the hijacking piece of the story, and you're absolutely right. We've covered extensively here on the show about the buildings,
and that's how James Colbert did it.
Use about
12 years ago,
right?
With the Colbert report. Follow the trillions or whatever, and then he gets into the inside trading and where they're intercepting, for a moment, and doing their deals. And then that being double or tripled insured, that guy that bought
Abraham Silverstein.
Yeah. The whole, Colbert, exposed this, a long time ago.
And I think our job is to say, why now? Why then? Why did some people? Well, it's God's will. And this is all going to be exposed.
Why doesn't anyone listen to the truth? Yeah, go figure. Again,
there will be people brought to the truth, but the majority of the people are still going to go out and vote for Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. And I think Trump is throwing the election. Of course, the economy is going to go bad. We're waiting on the wings for Michelle Obama. Right. I'm the guy that could maybe sometimes, look for my glasses, with a flashlight on my phone, or look for my phone with the flashlight on my phone. But it's been a long time since I've been wrong about the Bible or what the heck is going to happen in our future. And, people can take that and the best thing they could do is go back and find out. You know, look at the show, say where we've been wrong. It's it, especially on doctrine that we have been uncovering in these last 5 years that I've been ignoring the Stones. A few more minutes of this, RJ. Anything you want to add?
No, yeah, let her roll.
The controlled demolition of that. That has been a huge part of the story. Most people have been focusing on that. But you're right. I think the hijacking piece of it is arguably more important because that is the theatrics that were used that day to get us all scared, right? That's changed air travel forever, and we have to take off our shoes. We go through massive screening processes now as a result of all of this, right? The total control and scanning of our faces using biometric data, all of these things stem from the idea that these planes were hijacked. So let's get there first. You believe that, first of all, these planes were not hijacked. They were controlled. So talk about that, and then I want to play some of the audio clips. You can toss to them, play them however you want, because and tell us what we're hearing.
Yeah. So I think first of all, there's the plausibility question. Is it plausible that hijackers could really hijack all these planes? And when you look through history, there's only a handful of cases where hijackers have actually tried to remove pilots from the aircraft, and in all these from the controls of the aircraft. And in all of these cases, they're unsuccessful, and it's a really chaotic situation. You know, the fights ensue, passengers and flight attendants get involved. Sometimes the pilots do manage to contact air traffic control. And it's a messy, chaotic, scary situation that usually results in the hijackers not actually getting control of the planes. And on top of that, we know that these hijackers, these alleged hijackers, the so-called muscle hijackers, were all quite small. They're all under the height of 5'7" or 5'8". They all weigh, under 135 pounds or so. And then we have these pilots on the plane who are all 6 out of 8 of the pilots are military trained. We flew in the Air Force and the Marines, et cetera. And then you've got a lot of people on the plane who are also really strong or well trained. Who, what happens in these types of situations?
Much info.
Just stayed contained in the cockpit, right? And so, about a minute and a half later, you start getting phone calls supposedly coming from the flight where passengers are reporting what's going on. And lo and behold, and this is for all 4 planes, not just Flight 93, but Flight 93, it's the most obvious because we have these radio transmissions. Nobody reports the actual cockpit entry, how the hijackers got into the cockpit. Nobody reports how the hijackers defeated the pilots physically. Nobody reports where the pilots are now, what happened to them. There's only 2 very vague references to what happened to the pilots across the 4 flights of all the calls. And we're talking about 28 phone calls made by about 19 passengers and flight attendants across the 4 flights, most of them on Flight 93, 12 of them on Flight 93. So that gives us the biggest window into this sort of false story. And as you go on, these phone calls are made over the next sort of 20 to 30 minutes, and none of them are consistent. And the biggest one that stands out is the biggest few that stand out are passengers reporting the cockpit invasion happening at that time when they're on the phone. So it would be like 15 minutes later, and you have a passenger, Jeremy Glick or Todd Beamer, reporting to the person that they're talking to.
Let's roll.
Yeah, they're getting ready to hijack the plane right now. Okay, yeah, they're going into the cockpit right now, and they're taking the pilots out or whatever. So Todd Beamer, the famous passenger, because he's reported to have said, "Let's roll," when the passengers on Flight 93 supposedly try to take back the plane. He's the one who said, "Oh, they're entering the cockpit now." And the person who reported that was very specific that she was on the phone with him for 7 minutes before he reported that. So you've got this story that's coming from the calls that just doesn't add up with the idea that the flight was actually taken over at 9:28 and started to change its course. You've also got, I could go on and on, but you've got totally inconsistent reports, contradictory reports of the violence that's taking place on the planes. So one person describes a passenger being stabbed.
It bothers me that Clayton is so into UFOs, because as people, like Joe Rogan and other people are coming out and joining the conspiracy theory, and, they're not doing it for like, oh my gosh, God is judging the United States because, they've been bad and faking the Bible for all these years. So go ahead, man. You got anything here? Let's see. I wanted to.
Well, yeah, it's. I mean, you keep watching. You know, it's been a long. 3 years now. So, yeah.
Here, check out this guy here. You know, I do want it. Because they offered a prize in 1940, and maybe we'll just wrap it up with this and say, you know, they say keep them wanting more. Am I sharing? I am not. So here you go. I want your opinion on where did this guy Indian with the skull come from? It's a prize, and then we'll get a little. This is the guy that had his own timestamp where it gave his name, but where it usually shows time.
That's the decapitated head of John the Baptist. And because the early Christians actually worshiped John the Baptist, they didn't worship Jesus, they worshiped John, the great Essene initiator. And after his head's chopped off, Mary Magdalene claims it, and this is why she's got her hands with this.
So, this is not in the Bible. This is all their apocryphal stuff. So we don't believe this if there's new people there. So this is that Da Vinci Code stuff, RJ. That Jesus.
Well, yeah. Herod's wife's daughter is the one that gave it to her mother, wasn't it?
Right. Herodias, because John the Baptist had called out her adultery.
Right.
So he had her. She had her little.
Yeah, and he had been in prison. He had been in prison for a while, but then with that party going on, and ask whatever. Yeah, that's how that all went down. Because he said, whatever your request, up to half the kingdom. Well, she just wanted a head on a platter. John's in particular.
Right. And she didn't know what she wanted. She went and asked her mother.
Correct.
And her mother said, "Get me the head. Get me the head." So this guy makes that's a good example. This guy makes way too much, and so does the Da Vinci Code and all the Dan Brownites. But this leads. It says he's wrapping this up.
Very famous M signature, the way she's holding her interlocking fingers on this skull, and then the candle symbolizes illumination. And this is a highly mystical painting. Georges de la Tour. It's in the Metropolitan Museum in New York City, and portraying Magdalene as this illuminator. So I'm showing this to you because I went from the head of Osiris to the head of John the Baptist, and Mary Magdalene, all these mysteries. We've talked about the head of Osiris. Now we've talked about the head of Mary Magdalene's got. Now we want to talk about the place of the skull.
Here we go.
And by the place of the skull, I mean Nashville, Tennessee.
Yeah, man. Who knew?
On February 2nd, 1949, the Nashville Banner wrote an article saying the city announced a $150 prize to anyone who could explain why there was an Indian on the Great Seal of the city of Nashville. So Nashville's had this seal of an Indian holding a skull, but nobody knows what it means. So some bright person at the Banner in the Tennessean said, well, let's have a contest and let's at least come to some idea of what this could possibly be. So the Tennessean also offered prizes for the best name for the Indian depicted, because nobody knew who this was or what it meant. And though various explanations were given, even the Native American model who posed for the modern drawing was identified, but no definitive explanation was found for why Nashville is symbolized by an Indian holding a skull. They agreed, or the contest winner said this is a Native American chief, a Cherokee called Akananastada. The skull and implements of war were buried as a symbol of peace in a ceremony with General James Robertson, and tobacco symbolizes a source of wealth and a gift from the Native Americans. That's just whatever. You can say anything. This represents a Toyota, if you want. And it has as much validity as what they're saying here.
It reminds
Nobody
me of
knows
Fonzie when Fonzie grew up.
Indian with a skull, but yet you see all these historical markers all over town. There's the Indian holding a skull.
When was that originally created?
In the 1920s. The 1920s.
To a group of people that knows why.
Oh, great. Well, let me give my explanation, and then
Yeah, this is a very important part right here, RJ. So they got the Indian on the skull, on the modern symbol, and he's going to explain this as soon as this drunk
He
here.
attributes it to being envisioned in 30 years before this contest. Something like that.
That's when they made their seal for Nashville, the current
Yeah, but
seal.
whether the seal was something that was already in existence prior or what.
It looks like it was, and
Yeah,
now
that-
pay special attention to when this is dated to.
I really want to hear you. The fact of the matter is that 1,000 years ago, Nashville was even then identified as a place with a skull. Or
So about right in our time frame, RJ,
Yep.
these people would have come out with like, well, we don't have any shell flags. Let's make a flag. It was a skull, right? Yeah, let's do the skull thing. And because 1,000 years earlier, and that would have been, hey,
Well, that's what Golgotha, right? The place of the skull.
isn't that awesome? Yeah, Golgo. Yeah, he didn't bring it up, but he's
Okay.
more. Yeah, he's kind of weird. But go back here.
let me give my explanation, and then I really want to hear you. The fact of the matter is that 1,000 years ago, Nashville was even then identified as a place with a skull, or a Native American holding a skull. This is a shell gorget that was found here in Nashville that shows one of the Mississippians, as they were known, that inhabited Nashville 1,000 years ago. And he's holding a mace in one hand, he's got his forked eye here, and he's holding a skull in his hand. And so maybe this idea of an Indian holding a skull has been implanted in the Nashville thought sphere for a very long time. It most certainly has for 1,000 years, and we're still using it even today. This is an artist's interpretation of.
I don't know. Sometimes people like proof, you know. Here's this guy that gets his own name by his timestamp. It's not Henry Winkler, the actor from Happy Days when we were young, RJ. It just looks like him.
Okay.
At Belmont at that time. And I knew nothing about the Bible. In our home, Waylon, Willie, Chris, and Johnny were the four apostles. And the Bible was
That's
still
funny.
are, right?
The Quest Iron, huh?
The Bible
Yeah.
was Colorado.
Quest
Magazine.
Iron.
My father was obsessed with taking us out to Aspen in the summertime.
So he's obviously, his dad was rich if they're going to be taking him to Aspen in the, you know.
Yeah,
Like-
being privileged. Yeah, that nothing wrong being privileged. Sure.
A little
I don't know
more.
why we didn't go to Colorado. We came to Nashville instead and ended up staying. And so here I am, 20 years old in a sophomore sociology class, and the professor assigns us to review a book whose implications would impact Christianity and write a 3-page review of this book. So up I go down to Davis Kidd Booksellers in Green Hills when it was there. And
Wow.
there's a brand new international bestseller on the shelf.
I wrote a couple of 3-page reports yesterday. I would have, you know, I think this is a Dan Brown book, so we can date it back. I think this must have been the 80s or something when it. So he buys it and he doesn't not like it. Well, let him tell the story.
It's called Holy Blood, Holy Grail. I pull it off. I'm like, wow, the crucifixion was a hoax. Jesus and Mary Magdalene were married. They had children. After the crucifixion and resurrection, they went to southern France. They holed up in a little hilltop village called Rennes-le-Château, and all their secrets are still there. And by the way, the Catholic Church had exterminated as many as 1 million men, women, and children, Cathars, who lived in that region to prevent the original version of Christianity from being taught.
And that's, they say, this guy looking like he belongs on Top Chef is the same to me as everyone that brings it, him bringing in this extra nonsense is like the people who bring in the Book of Enoch and Jubilees and Josephus. Josephus has to be added to the list of, like, how can you fall for that? And you're a short season, golden age past kind of person. Everything he writes denies what you say you now believe because of, we're teaching mud flood was Armageddon. There's a new veil being lifted. And oh yeah, once you get done accepting that the mud flood was Armageddon, it's time to look at the Trinity. Go, RJ.
Well, yeah, that's why you can't trust the Bible. Right.
That's what they all
No.
seem to go back to. That's what they all want to
Well,
talk about. Yep.
God doesn't know what he's talking about.
No, but I believe that he does. I know you believe he does. I know that your job is to be the mouth of the 2 or 3 witnesses. Have I ever progressed on any doctrine without you agreeing on it? No,
Yeah,
we got
well,
a thing going here.
Well,
We got a thing going
transition.
here, and
But when you-
and that's why the intro always says, if you want to debate us, come on. And not one person.
Transitioning from everything you've been taught from before you can even remember to trying to sort things out and with obviously the help of the anchor is the Bible, God's word. So by going back to what is revealed in the Bible and then changing your views on what you have been taught to what you truly believe. Yeah, that doesn't happen overnight, but over time and with the Lord, lifting the veil and seeking and through seeking his truth, I believe you'll find those that quite the unity.
Does anything ever going to trigger you? Why am I the only one of us two that gets triggered? Why can you think so calm about all this? Okay, so we're gonna get you hooked on mud flood was Armageddon, the waiting on 2046, not expecting a rapture. Then we're going to work on you on the Trinity. But RJ, we're not finished. Give this a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to come back to you and give because we teach this, and they're going to have to, we can't deny it.
Well, my stumbling was with physics, what's actually moving, what's stationary, and that's how I stumbled on your channel and then trying to get a hold of you, which you weren't cooperating with, but yeah, it takes effort, it takes dedication, it takes time, and a lot of it, is going to be a challenge,
And this might challenge a lot of what people think about creation.
Genesis 2 verse 5, we read, "When no plant of the field was yet in the earth, and no herb of the field had yet sprung up, for the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was no one to till the ground." This verse defines the exact moment of the creation of man, which is the special focus of this narrative. In this way, the author of Genesis tries to demonstrate a complete absence of human existence on earth before the creation of the first couple, Adam and Eve. The author of Genesis conveys this through the depiction of the newly created earth prior to the moment of man's appearance on it.
Two the whole world in his hands.
They got to keep it in people's minds. So, because I believe that, through the work on Psalm 82, and I believe building on what Dr. Heiser brought to the table, that he never really acknowledged that Jesus told the truth, that he came back in that generation, and going forward, that's pretty much, did Jesus tell the truth
Yeah.
about that or
Yeah,
not?
what I see in this picture here, God is tipping it towards the camera because it's just a disc, right?
Yeah,
Instead of from top down, because the
there's a lot
camera's
about
over here.
this video
Yeah,
that
it's not
is,
from his, it's not from the vantage point of his throne room above the vaulted, dome. Now that's from that vantage point. He's tipping it towards the camera, and there you have it.
he's got the whole world in his hands. He's got the whole
The
wide
wide
world.
world.
So
Yeah.
anyway, we also teach and believe in two creations, but this is kind of sketchy. So see what you can pick up.
2 verse 5. First, the absence of any traces of human culture or products of cultivating the soil. And second, the presence of atmospheric conditions that would make it possible for the existence of any culture or human life.
Where did he get
Yeah, I
that
would
from?
say,
Genesis
what
2
you
5.
just said, minimum to, I think when he created, he began with the heavens and the angelic, whatever, armies, or however you want to label what's the spirit world, that's, I feel, is a creation. And then you have some sort of fall, and then as far as, uh, creating in his image. And then, yeah, then you have the creation where he has to breathe the life into the dust. They're they're different. So if you're saying that's all the same, well, you can say that, I suppose, but that isn't what's being described in my mind.
Right.
Uh,
We have no bush
there's-
of the field, no small plant. Lord has not caused it to rain, no man to work the ground. That's verse 5. In verse 6, this must be the atmospheric condition. There was no spring, there was no irrigation. When I've looked up this word too much it means irrigation. And irrigation was going up from the land and watering the whole face of the ground. And man formed from the dust of the ground. I don't think we need to, go into the atmospheric, no traces of human culture. It only says that there was no man to till the ground. There could have been, it might be hard for a 30-foot giant person or a 15-foot giant person to till the ground. They're kind of big. They're bigger than a horse, or so, I don't know. Or they wouldn't want to do it. Here's a little bit more of this guy.
All this, according to the idea of the author of the book of Genesis, points to the fact that prior to the creation of Adam, there was no civilization on earth. Thus, there has been no humanity. If we were to convey the gist of the narrative in Genesis 2, it would give us the following picture. When the Lord created the heavens and the earth was a void, fruitless desert. A stream would rise from the earth, says Genesis 2 verse 6. The earth had not a...
You got that part right.
Well, it
Now-
sounds like a joke. Why in my mind, when I think of the Garden of Eden, there was no reason for pulling weeds, or, it just was how the Lord had the garden, how he created, it. And as far as, from the sweat of your brow, that was all judgment stuff after the fall. So what is being described or implied there in that little bit of video you showed, yeah, I think there's some deception being
Right. They need to listen to us. People don't need to listen to them. So in his own image, Jesus created singular. See what I mean there? Third person masculine.
Emmanuel,
Singular. He created in the image, so that is an image. And
The
they
image can be in your mind, you know. It
male
obviously.
and female. He created them. Now, when the big takeaway for Do Re Mi in this situation is that there was no man to work the ground. A mist went up. So the Lord our God, Jesus Christ, formed the man from the dust of the ground and breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. That has nothing to do with what they described in Genesis chapter 1. But instead, anew from the dust, and the dust is the key, ashes to ashes, dust to dust. It ties into what almost could be considered, like what they try to portray Jesus as the head of the divine council is, well, no, that means Zeus. And if Christians are dumb, Psalms. But they're, if you're going to die like men, and then later in another creation before, because who knows how many times, it mentions it. There is a divine council. They are Elohim. Jesus judges them. How long are you going to be ruling your nations? Maybe like the strong-armed children of Lot, the Ammonites and the Moabites. They were their own nations, had their own God. And these divine council, no, because of all of your shenanigans, and even though you're gods, sons of the Most High, created like, not begotten, but to be Elohim, like Jesus was, to rule over these nations, to deal with whatever Satan tried to pull, whether it was poisoning the minds of them or actually deicide of assaulting our Savior, believing that he didn't have an immune system that where nothing sinful could ever enter him. The sentence was to the Most High of them, they're going to die like men. And I believe that
Well,
we
does
were
that
made.
imply they are men, or they're not men, but they're going to die like men? I know they're using Prince.
And how did the men die? When the glittering sword hit the flood in Noah, we have the example that it doesn't say, oh, they drowned in the flood. They perished in the flood. They were reserved in judgment, which is why we got to get back to the stones to prove that the stones are crying out, because they are reserved in judgment. It goes back to the triumphal entry of Hosanna, Hosanna. Tell your people to stop calling you the Messiah. Well, it's prophesied they would. And if they don't, everything in judgment is free to go. There is no judgment. John the Baptist, he was talked about earlier. He said, from these stones, I could raise up descendants from Abraham. The stones will cry out. We are living stones to be fit in to the body of Christ, or we are not. Or we are not. So, no, it's not Zeus. It was never Zeus. That's what the Greeks would like to call him at that time. The Greeks are the Gentiles who eventually realized that from decree on high from Nebuchadnezzar, enforced by Cyrus and others, there is no higher God than the God of Israel. That he's the highest of the gods. And he didn't call him Zeus. It really doesn't matter what you call him, as long as there is the Most High God. And if they were saying there's a Messiah coming that's going to heal everything, and they didn't know his name was Emmanuel, that's because it wasn't told yet. Isaiah was living at the time of those people. He didn't he didn't say his name will be Emmanuel until halfway through the situation. I'm way off topic.
Yeah, and then he identifies Cyrus, and the Gentiles that be involved in God's servants. Right.
Let's hear a little bit more of how this guy kind of, if he got anywhere with the skull or what he moved on to, but he's obviously his puppet.
To superimpose ancient Athens over modern Nashville. Nashville has been called the Athens of the South, supposedly because of the number of universities that we have here. For trivia's sake, the Athens of the North is Edinburgh, Scotland. Maybe there's a connection. I don't know what it is, but we have not just one Greek temple, we have two. If you go down to Legislative Plaza, this obviously is our state capitol, and you see this temple complex there to the left. Inside is this beautiful statue of the god Mars. In ancient Athens, according to the Apostle Paul, he was debating the Greek scholars at Mars Hill. And this little temple sits up on its own hill that we call it Capitol Hill, but I call it Mars Hill because of this statue of Mars in its own temple enclosure, built by the same people that built the Parthenon in the 1920s at exactly the same time. So there was a deliberate intention to create two temples from ancient Athens.
Well, I guess the one thing we can
that's
say,
who gets credit. Yes, whatever.
one thing we can say that we proved is that, so it's not only the Tartarian movement that has noticed, wow, there's some old buildings that look like they're Greek and Roman and stuff like that in the United States, and wait till they find them all over the world. But as usual, what it's going to come down to, it doesn't matter if you're called, predestined, chosen, or elected, or adopted. Unless your heart is changed enough to at one time you've been, emotionally and hopefully physically on your knees saying, Jesus Christ is God, the Bible is true, he died for my sins, and you believe it in your heart, and then you confess it with your mouth. That seems to be proof that then you may have been called, elected. But unless somebody, it's not a ritual. I'm not talking about a ritual. It's what is it?
You mean God is in the spirit and God in the flesh, and that's
No,
three?
that you actually, that if you're able to confess, and I don't want to get into the, well, what about the thief on the cross? You to get baptized,
Well, we know what we get credit for.
Yeah,
Nothing.
most of us that hear the gospel are supposed to confess it. That would seem obvious to me.
Yeah, having the heart change. Yeah, it's a process. I'm not saying it's instantaneous, but yeah, maybe it is. But it something changes in it. Yeah, as far as setting a stopwatch to it, I wouldn't recommend it. But something happens in real time, and you're not the same.
And the example of John 3:16 of being born again, I've been taught, I feel fortunately most of my life, that the correct way of looking at it is you didn't choose your first parents, and you didn't know anything about being a baby, and that when you're born again, as an adult or younger, your heart's changed, and you don't know it until the things that you used to love, you start to hate. And then once your heart is changed, you hear God's voice, the shepherd's voice, and you're drawn to it. And that leads to, and we'll close with this. It'll be, we'll wrap it up in an hour and a half. This won't take long. What I call the scariest verse in the scriptures is John 6:66. What do we do with it? What did they do with the 666 in the Bible of, what is arguably the most popular gospel simply because of the first 4 verses, just in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things were made through him, and without him was not anything made that was made. In him is life, and the life was the light of men. Not scary. John chapter 6, verse 66 says, after this, many of his disciples turned back and no longer walked with him. That's scary. Why? It was because the same thing I just told you.
Well, so then were they disciples?
That's the argument. That's the argument that people want to talk about. Like, well, what did they weren't believers? They could have fallen away. All I know, RJ, is one of the things that made me wake up and decide that well, I should go just do some dead hang, and then I did a pull up and a half because I was kind of stiff this morning. There's different people do different things in the morning, but what he said before that of made so many turn away was, this is what I told you, that no one can come to Jesus unless it is granted him by the Father. And when he refers to the Father, he means the author and finisher of our faith. The Father is the Most High El Elyon, the Spirit God, who he's everywhere all the time, being all powerful, knowing everything, waiting to show us, his love on that great day on the great white throne. So, there we have it. That is a pretty important thing. The whole, you hear his voice, you don't turn back, you keep your hand on the plow. There you go.
Remain faithful, yeah.
Faithful to the end. There it is. More brevity. The Spirit is dealing with the spirit world, and we are along for the ride.
Yeah, it isn't like the spirit has no idea what the physical world is. Well, no, he created that. He knows everything about the physical world, but the battle is spiritual, is where the war rages on. And that's what I was saying, how many creations are there? Well, I think more than just a couple.
Right. But what we know is what we're held accountable for. So I've got to get going. RJ, you have a great morning. I want to remind everybody that this is Mud Flood Was Armageddon, and the Mud Flood was Armageddon. We're never going to tell you anything else. Why would we? We are here to try to prove to you we have your best interest at heart. Amen. Hallelujah. Aho. Aloha. Arrivederci.
The memorial
Ciao.
show.
Sayonara. Aveda se nakame. And sweet